17 sealed containers sat on 17 desks. Inside each one, something red and beautiful waited to kill. The students of Advanced Xenobotany Class 7B had trained for years to reach this moment. They came from 12 different species across the galaxy. They had studied thousands of plants, learned hundreds of safety protocols, and memorized every rule about handling dangerous specimens. Now they faced their final examination. Professor Ilmery stood at the front of the sealed laboratory dome. She was Fendori, her body made of living crystal that shifted colors with her moods. Right now, she glowed a calm blue as she explained the test. "Before you sits a specimen of crimson nightweep," she said. "It is considered one of the 10 most dangerous plants in known space. A single drop of its sap can dissolve organic tissue in seconds. Your task is simple. Analyze the specimen, document its properties, recommend containment protocols." The alien students looked at their containers with fear. Some leaned away from their desks. A few refused to touch the seals at all. Danny Reyes opened his container immediately. The classroom went silent. Every eye turned to watch the human reach inside with gloved hands and lift out the plant. It was beautiful in a terrible way. Deep red leaves curled around a stem that pulsed with inner light. Small droplets of clear sap clung to its surface like morning dew. "Human," shouted Riley, a small four-armed Cathari at the desk beside him. "What are you doing? You will kill us all." Danny looked up with calm brown eyes. "The container has air filtration. The sap is contact toxic, not airborne, and these gloves are rated for acid." He turned the plant gently, examining it from every angle. "Besides, how am I supposed to study it without looking at it?" Professor Ilmery's crystals shifted to curious yellow. In 40 years of teaching this examination, she had never seen a student open their container in the first minute. Most took an hour just to work up the courage. The test continued. Students took readings through their sealed containers. They used scanners and sensors to gather data without ever touching their specimens. When Professor Ilmery called for initial observations, they spoke of toxicity levels, danger classifications, and recommended destruction protocols. Then it was Danny's turn. He stood up, still holding the crimson nightweep in his hands. Several students moved their chairs backward. One actually left the room. "Before I give my observations," Danny said, "I need to ask a question." Professor Ilmery tilted her crystalline head. "Proceed." "Is this food or weapon?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air recyclers seemed to go quiet. Bramvith, a large insectoid student with mandibles the size of Danny's forearm, made a clicking sound of confusion. "What kind of question is that? It is neither. It is a hazard, a threat, something to be contained or destroyed." "That's one way to look at it," Danny agreed. "But where I come from, we have a different approach." Whisper, a Sorelli whose pale skin glowed with bioluminescent patches, leaned forward with interest. Her species communicated as much through light as through sound, and right now her patterns showed deep curiosity. "Explain," Professor Ilmery commanded. Danny set the plant down carefully on his desk. "On Earth, we have a plant called castor. Its seeds contain ricin, one of the most lethal natural toxins ever discovered. A few milligrams can kill a full-grown human." He paused. "We also use those same seeds to make castor oil, medicine, lubricant, industrial applications, billions of units produced every year." The students exchanged confused glances. "We have another plant called foxglove," Danny continued. "It stops hearts, kills quickly and painfully, but we extract a chemical from it called digitalis that saves millions of lives from heart disease." He gestured at the crimson nightweep. "So when I look at this, I do not just see danger, I see a question. What else could this be?" Professor Ilmery's crystals cycled through colors too fast to read. "The crimson nightweep has no beneficial applications. Every species in the galaxy has studied it. The conclusion is unanimous. It exists only to kill." "With respect, Professor," Danny said, "has anyone actually tried to find other uses, or did everyone just see the danger and stop looking?" No one answered. Danny picked up the plant again. I would like permission to run additional tests, temperature reactions, neutralizing agents, molecular analysis. I want to know what this thing really is, not just what it does on first contact. That is extremely dangerous, Professor Ilmery said. Yes, Danny agreed, but so is assuming we already know everything. The Fendori professor stood very still for a long moment. Her crystals finally settled on a deep, thoughtful purple. Permission granted, she said, but you will use the isolation chamber and you will document every step. Danny smiled. It was not a reckless smile or a brave one. It was the smile of someone who had asked a question and been allowed to find the answer. Thank you, Professor. I have a feeling this plant has been waiting a long time for someone to ask what it could become instead of what it already is. He carried the crimson nightweep toward the isolation chamber, walking past 17 students who watched him with a mixture of horror and fascination. None of them understood yet, but they would. On Earth, humans had learned long ago that the line between poison and medicine was often just a matter of asking the right question. The isolation chamber was a cube of reinforced glass and energy shields. It could contain explosions, chemical spills, and biological hazards. It had been designed to keep dangerous things inside and safe things outside. Danny Reyes worked inside it like he belonged there. The other students had finished their examinations. Their reports all said the same thing. Crimson nightweep, extremely toxic, no known uses, recommend containment or destruction, standard answers, safe answers. But they did not leave. Instead, they gathered around the isolation chamber to watch the human work. He is going to die, Brambeth said matter-of-factly. The insectoid's compound eyes reflected Danny's movements. Humans are fragile, one mistake and he will dissolve. Then why are you watching? Whisper asked. Her bioluminescent patterns showed genuine curiosity. Because I have never seen someone choose death so calmly, Brambeth replied. It is fascinating in a horrible way. Inside the chamber, Danny was explaining his process out loud. The chamber's speakers carried his voice to the watching students. First thing I want to test is heat reaction, he said, carefully extracting a small amount of sap into a sealed vial. On Earth, cooking often neutralizes plant toxins. Cassava root contains cyanide compounds, but proper heating makes it safe to eat. Billions of people depend on it as a food source. Riley's forearms crossed in confusion. Your species eats poison. We eat lots of things that would kill us if prepared wrong, Danny said without looking up. Kidney beans are toxic raw, rhubarb leaves contain oxalic acid, even. Potatoes produce solanine in their green parts. He placed the vial in a heating unit. Humans learned early that the difference between poison and food is often just preparation. Professor Ilmery had remained to observe. Her crystalline body now glowed with the purple of deep thought. This is a known aspect of human evolution. Your homeworld forced you to extract nutrition from dangerous sources. Earth is not kind, Danny agreed. But that taught us something important. Danger is not the end of the conversation, it is the beginning. The heating unit reached temperature. Danny watched the vial carefully, recording changes on his datapad. At 400 degrees, nothing happened. At 600 degrees, the sap began to change color. At 847 degrees, something remarkable occurred. The clear, deadly liquid transformed. It became thick and amber-colored, almost like honey. Danny ran a quick toxicity scan. The corrosive proteins have denatured, he announced. This substance is no longer toxic. Murmurs spread through the watching students. Danny was not finished. He tested the transformed sap's properties. His eyes widened as he read the results. This is incredible, he said. The molecular bonds have rearranged into a polymer chain. This is an adhesive, and not just any adhesive. He double-checked his readings. This is stronger than any organic bonding agent in my database. That cannot be correct, Brambeth protested. The nightweep has been studied for centuries. Someone would have discovered this. Only if someone tried heating it, Danny replied. But why would you heat something you were trying to avoid touching? The logic was simple and devastating. For hundreds of years, every species had approached the crimson nightweep with the same assumption. It was dangerous, therefore it must be contained or destroyed. No one had asked what else it might become because no one had looked past what it already was. Danny moved on to the roots. He carefully extracted material and began testing it with various chemical agents. The students watched in silence as he worked. Even those who had called him reckless now leaned forward with interest. The root contains a secondary compound, Danny said after an hour of testing, when I add a neutralizing solution and dilute it properly. He ran another scan and went very still. What is it? Whisper asked, her glow patterns shifting to urgent blue. This compound kills bacteria, Danny said slowly. Specifically, it kills several strains that are resistant to standard galactic antibiotics. He looked up at the watching faces. This could be medicine. Professor Ilmary's crystals flared bright white. You are certain? I would need proper laboratory verification, Danny admitted. But the initial results are clear. The crimson nightweep's roots contain powerful antibiotic compounds. The room erupted in noise. Students talked over each other in a dozen languages. Some expressed disbelief. Others demanded to see the data. A few simply stared at the human in the isolation chamber with expressions that mixed respect and something like fear. Whisper pressed her hands against the glass. How did you know to look for this? Danny smiled tiredly. I did not know, I just asked a different question. Everyone else asked how dangerous this plant was. I asked what it could do. He looked at the crimson nightweep still sitting in its container. Red leaves, deadly sap, roots full of potential medicine. The same plant that every species had feared and avoided for centuries. On Earth we have a saying, Danny continued. The dose makes the poison. Almost anything can kill you in large enough amounts. Water, oxygen, salt, and almost anything can help you if you understand it well enough. Professor Ilmary approached the isolation chamber. Her glow had settled into deep gold, the color of profound realization. You have not just passed this examination, she said quietly. You have changed it. Danny shook his head. I just asked a question. The plant had the answers all along. Someone just needed to be curious enough to listen. He looked at his fellow students gathered around him. Aliens from 12 different worlds, all raised to see danger and avoid it. Would anyone like to help me test the leaves next? For a long moment, no one moved. Then Whisper stepped forward, her glow burning with determination. Show me how to ask the right questions, she said. It was a beginning. 3 days passed. The examination had officially ended, but Danny's work continued. The isolation chamber had become a gathering place. Students who had finished their regular coursework found reasons to visit the laboratory. They brought datapads and questions. They watched the human work and slowly began to understand. Whisper had become Danny's unofficial assistant, the Sorelli. Stood beside him now, her pale skin glowing with soft concentration as she carefully measured a sample of dried nightweep leaves. Why did your species develop this way of thinking? She asked. Her voice was quiet, almost musical. My people see danger and retreat. Yours sees danger and asks questions. Danny considered the question while adjusting his equipment. I think it was necessity. Earth did not give us a choice. He set down his tools and turned to face her. Other students had gathered near the chamber's viewing wall, listening. Imagine a world where almost everything wants to kill you, Danny said. The weather is extreme, hot enough to boil water, cold enough to freeze blood. The animals are predators or prey, and either way they are dangerous. The plants produce toxins as defense mechanisms. Even the water can carry diseases that will destroy you from inside. This sounds like a death world, Riley said from outside the chamber. Her forearms were wrapped around herself in a gesture of distress. That is what most species call it, Danny agreed. But to us, it is just home, and when home is that dangerous, you cannot afford to simply avoid every threat. You have to learn to use them. He picked up a vial containing processed nightweed extract. My grandmother was a healer in her village. She made medicine from plants that could kill in larger doses. Digitalis for heart problems, aspirin from willow bark, morphine from poppies. All of them came from dangerous sources. Your healers work with poisons? Brambeth asked. The large insectoid had become a regular visitor, his earlier skepticism slowly turning to reluctant respect. Always, Danny said, every medicine is a poison in the wrong dose. Every poison is a medicine in the right one. We learned to walk that line because we had to. Whisper's glow patterns shifted to thoughtful amber. So when you look at the nightweed, you do not see what it is, you see what it could become. Exactly, Danny smiled. The plant did not evolve to help us or hurt us, it just evolved. The danger and the benefit are both there waiting, someone just has to be willing to look. Professor Ilmery entered the laboratory. Her crystalline form had been shifting to warmer colors lately, her usual academic distance replaced by something closer to excitement. She carried a data pad in her translucent hands. The preliminary results are confirmed, she announced. The antibiotic compound from the nightweed roots is effective against 17 known resistant strains. The Galactic Medical Council wants to begin formal testing. The students erupted in excited chatter. Danny just nodded calmly and returned to his work. There is more, Professor Ilmery continued. The adhesive compound has been analyzed by material scientists. It has potential applications in spacecraft construction, medical bonding, and deep-water equipment. 3 companies have already expressed interest in licensing the extraction process. A plant everyone wanted to destroy, Whisper said softly. Now everyone wants to use it. The plant did not change, Danny said. Only the questions we asked about it. That evening, Danny sat in the laboratory alone. The other students had left to celebrate the news. Whisper had invited him to join them, but he had declined. He needed time to think. The crimson nightweed sat before him in its container, red leaves catching the light, deadly sap glistening on its stem, roots full of medicine that could save lives across the galaxy. His datapad chimed with a message from Earth, his mother asking how school was going. He typed a short reply not mentioning the discovery or the attention. She would not care about fame or recognition. She would only ask one question. Did you help someone? He looked at the nightweed and thought about all the people who might live because someone had finally asked what else this plant could be. Thornback children saved from shell rot. Wounded soldiers healed faster with better bonding agents. Infections cured with new antibiotics. Yes, he typed back, I think I did. He was about to leave when Whisper appeared at the laboratory door. Her glow was subdued, her movements hesitant. May I ask you something? She said. Of course. She entered slowly and sat across from him. Were you ever afraid? When you first opened the container, when you began testing, when you handled something that could have killed you with one mistake? Danny thought carefully before answering. Fear is useful, it keeps you alert, it makes you careful. He met her glowing eyes. But I have learned not to let fear ask the only questions. Fear asks what could go wrong, curiosity asks what could go right. You need both. Whisper was silent for a long moment, then her glow brightened to warm gold. I want to learn to ask both kinds of questions, she said. Will you teach me? Danny looked at the crimson nightweed, beautiful and deadly and full of hidden potential. Then he looked at Whisper, an alien from a cautious species taking her first steps toward a different way of thinking. We can learn together, he said. That is how it works best. Outside the laboratory windows, stars burned in the darkness of space. Somewhere out there were thousands more dangerous plants on thousands of worlds, each one waiting for someone brave enough and curious enough to ask the right questions. The galaxy was full of poisons, and every single one of them might also be a cure. The challenge came on the 7th day. Graves was the oldest student in the xenobotany program. He was Thornback, a species known for their careful logic and even more careful approach to danger. His shell was thick and scarred from decades of cautious living. He had seen many things in his long life, and he did not like what he was seeing now. The faculty council chamber was full when Danny arrived. Professor Ilmery sat at the center of the curved table, flanked by 6 other instructors. Students filled the observation gallery, including Whisper and Riley and Bramvith. Graves stood in the challenger's position, his massive form casting shadows across the polished floor. "I have filed a formal objection to the human's methodology," Graves announced. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. His actions during the examination were reckless and endangered this entire station. Professor Ilmery's crystals shifted to neutral gray. "State your concerns for the record." Graves turned to face the gallery. The human opened a container of lethal biological material without proper caution. He performed unauthorized experiments using heat and chemical agents. He could have released toxic fumes, caused an explosion, or created unstable compounds that might have harmed everyone in the facility. Murmurs of agreement came from some of the watching students. Fear was a powerful thing, and Graves was speaking its language well. "Furthermore," Graves continued, "the results themselves are irrelevant. Even if the human discovered useful applications, the process of discovery was too dangerous. Science must proceed with caution. This human recklessness has no place in our institution." Professor Ilmery turned to Danny. "You may respond." Danny stepped forward calmly. He was small compared to Graves, soft and fragile-looking, but his eyes were steady and his voice was clear. "Everything Graves said about the risks is true," Danny admitted. Surprised silence filled the chamber. "I did open the container quickly. I did perform experiments that could have gone wrong. I did take chances that my classmates were not willing to take." Danny paused. "But I also took precautions every step of the way." He activated his datapad and projected his laboratory logs onto the chamber's display screen. "Here are my safety protocols. Sealed gloves rated for corrosive materials. Air filtration active throughout the process. Emergency containment systems on standby. Toxicity monitors running continuous scans." The logs scrolled past, showing careful documentation of every safety measure Danny had implemented. "I did not ignore the danger," Danny said. "I respected it, but I refused to let it stop me from asking questions." Graves made a rumbling sound of dismissal. "Safety protocols do not guarantee safety. One mistake and people die." "You are right," Danny agreed. "But I have a question for you, Graves. How many of your people die from shell rot every year?" The Thornback went very still. "I looked it up," Danny continued. "Shell rot kills approximately 40,000 thornbacks annually. The current treatments manage symptoms but do not cure the disease. Your people have been searching for a solution for over 200 years. He changed the display to show his research findings. "The antibiotic compound I extracted from the crimson nightweep shows effectiveness against the bacterial strain that causes shell rot. Early testing suggests it could be the basis for an actual cure." Graves stared at the data. His scarred shell seemed to tighten around him. "For 2 centuries, the nightweep was avoided and destroyed," Danny said quietly, "because it was dangerous, because everyone agreed it had no beneficial uses, because no one was willing to take the risk of finding out what else it might be." He met Graves's eyes directly. "How many of your people might have lived if someone had asked the right question 50 years ago, 100 years ago?" The chamber was absolutely silent. Professor Ilmery spoke carefully. "Danny, you understand this is not a fair argument. We cannot blame past researchers for failing to discover something that required your particular approach." "No," Danny agreed, "but we can learn from it. We can choose to ask different questions going forward. We can accept that some risks are worth taking, especially when the alternative is watching people die from problems that might have solutions hiding inside plants we were too afraid to study." Graves had not moved. His eyes remained fixed on the data showing potential treatment for a disease that had taken friends and family members throughout his long life. Finally, the Thornback spoke. His voice was quiet, the rumble gone. "If this treatment works," he said, "my youngest son might not have to watch his children suffer the way he did, the way I did." Danny nodded respectfully. "I hope it works, I truly do, and I hope we can find more solutions like this, hidden inside things we have been too afraid to examine." The faculty council deliberated briefly. Their decision was unanimous. Danny's methodology was ruled valid, with conditions. Future human-led experiments would require additional oversight, but the approach itself was recognized as valuable. Graves waited until the chamber emptied, then approached Danny alone. "I was wrong to challenge you," the old Thornback said. "No," Danny replied. "You were right to be cautious. Caution keeps people safe, but sometimes courage is necessary too. The trick is knowing when to use each one." Graves extended one massive clawed hand. Danny shook it without hesitation. "Teach me to ask your questions," Graves said. "I am old, but perhaps not too old to learn a new way of seeing." Danny smiled. "The best questions come from people who have seen the consequences of not asking them. I think you will be a natural." Together, they walked out of the council chamber. One old and armored, one young and soft, both looking toward a future where danger was not the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within 2 weeks, everyone knew about the human who had transformed a deadly plant into a medical breakthrough. Ships arrived at Station Verdant 7 carrying scientists, journalists, and corporate representatives. The Galactic Pharmaceutical Consortium sent a delegation of 12 to discuss synthesizing the antibiotic compound. Material engineers came to study the adhesive properties of heated nightweep sap. A famous botanist from the Kethran homeworld requested permission to observe Danny's research methods. Danny found the attention uncomfortable. He had not done this for fame or recognition. He had simply asked a question that no one else had thought to ask. But something more important was happening in the xenobotany program itself. Riley approached her next specimen differently. The small Cathari studied a corrosive fungus that everyone else had classified as purely hazardous. She remembered Danny's words about poison and medicine. With careful testing, she discovered the fungus produced enzymes that could break down certain industrial pollutants. A danger became a cleaning agent. Bramvith stopped simply cataloging threats. The insected researcher began asking what defensive plant chemicals might be useful in other applications. He found that one particularly aggressive vine produced a compound that could strengthen biological armor. His own species began using it to improve their exoskeletons. Even Graves contributed. The old Thornback spent hours in the archive, reviewing plants that had been classified as purely dangerous. He created a list of specimens worth re-examining with new questions. It grew to over 300 entries within the first week. Professor Ilmery watched this transformation with wonder. She had taught for 40 years and had never seen anything like it. "You have changed them," she told Danny one evening. The laboratory was quiet, most students gone for dinner. Not just their methods, their entire way of thinking. Danny looked up from his work. He had been studying the nightweep's pollen, which showed promise as a chemical catalyst. "I just showed them a different approach. They changed themselves." "You are too modest." Ilmery's crystals glowed warm gold. "I have been teaching xenobotany since before your species achieved faster-than-light travel. In all that time, I never thought to question our fundamental assumptions about dangerous specimens." She moved closer, her crystalline body catching the light. "Why do you think that is? Why did it take a human to ask what should have been obvious questions?" Danny considered his answer carefully. "I think it comes down to how we evolved. Your species developed on stable worlds with predictable dangers. You learned to identify threats and avoid them. That strategy worked for millions of years. And humans, we evolved on a world that actively tried to kill us every single day. We could not afford to just avoid threats. There were too many of them and they were everywhere. So we learned to analyze them, understand them, transform them. He smiled slightly. We became very good at turning problems into tools. Ilmarie was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision. I am going to propose a new course to the Institute's governing board, she said. Terran Pragmatic Methodology. It will teach students to approach dangerous specimens the way you do, not to ignore the risks, but to ask what else might be possible. You want to teach humans' crazy approach to the entire galaxy? Danny asked, surprised. I want to teach curiosity, Ilmarie replied. Real curiosity, the kind that does not stop when it encounters danger. The proposal was accepted within a week. The governing board had seen the results of Danny's work. They understood the value of what he represented. Enrollment filled within a day. The waiting list grew longer than any course in the Institute's history. Whisper came to Danny with the news, her bioluminescent patterns burning bright with excitement. 3,000 applications, she said. From 47 different species, everyone wants to learn to ask your questions. Danny felt overwhelmed. He was just a student himself, still learning. How could he teach others? Graves found him later that night, sitting alone in the observation deck, staring at the stars. You look troubled, the old Thornback said, settling his massive form onto a reinforced bench. I do not know if I am ready for this, Danny admitted. I just asked a question about a plant. Now everyone expects me to change how the galaxy thinks. Graves made a sound that might have been laughter. You already have. The question now is whether you will help guide that change or let it happen without you. Danny looked at the ancient Thornback, scarred and weathered from decades of careful living. Why are you helping me? You challenged my methods. You called me reckless. I was wrong, Graves said simply. And when a Thornback is wrong, he does not hide from it. He learns from it. He gestured toward the stars with one massive claw. Out there are billions of lives that might be saved by asking better questions. If an old skeptic like me can learn to see that, then your approach is worth teaching. Danny sat with those words for a while. Then he nodded slowly. All right, he said, but I cannot do it alone. I will need help. You have it, Graves replied. Whisper, really, Bramvith, half the xenobotany program. We all want to learn, and we want to help others learn too. Danny looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there were countless dangerous plants on countless worlds, each one hiding secrets that might save lives or change civilizations. All someone had to do was ask the right questions. Then let us get started, Danny said. We have a lot of work to do. The graduation ceremony took place in the Grand Hall of Station Verdant 7. Hundreds of species gathered under a dome of transparent material that showed the stars in all their glory. Light from a dozen nearby suns painted the crowd in shifting colors. Danny Reyes stood among his graduating classmates, wearing the simple robes of a certified xenobotanist. Beside him stood Whisper, Riley, Bramvith, and Graves, friends who had started as skeptics, partners who had learned to ask different questions. Professor Ilmarie addressed the gathering from the central platform. Her crystalline form blazed with pride and joy, colors shifting too fast to follow. This year's graduating class has accomplished something remarkable, she announced. They have not only completed their studies, they have transformed our entire discipline. The display screens showed images of their collective work. The crimson nightweep, now recognized as a source of medicine, adhesive, insecticide, and industrial catalyst. A plant once marked for destruction, now protected and cultivated across the sector. But more important than any single discovery, Ilmarie continued, is the new way of thinking this class has developed. The willingness to ask what else is possible, even when facing danger. She gestured toward Danny. One human asked a simple question on the first day of examination. Is this food or weapon? That question has changed how we approach every specimen in our archive. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I am pleased to announce that Danny Reyes will receive this year's Ilmarie Award for innovative thinking. He is the first human to earn this distinction. Applause filled the hall as Danny walked to the platform. He accepted the crystalline trophy, feeling its weight in his hands. Then he turned to face the audience. "I want to thank my classmates," he said, "especially those who thought I was crazy at first." Light laughter followed. "They taught me that curiosity is not enough on its own. You also need people willing to listen, challenge, and eventually join you." He held up the trophy, watching starlight refract through its surface. "On Earth, we have an ancient word, pharmakon. It comes from an old language called Greek. It means both poison and cure, both danger and remedy. The same substance can be either one depending on how you use it." The audience listened in silence. For a long time, the galaxy approached dangerous specimens with one question: how do we avoid this? It is a good question. It keeps people safe. Danny paused. But it is not the only question. Sometimes you also need to ask, what could this become? What potential is hiding inside the danger? He looked at his fellow graduates, at Whisper glowing with quiet pride, at Graves nodding slowly with understanding that had taken a lifetime to develop. Every poison might be a medicine, every threat might be a tool, every danger might be an opportunity. The difference is not in the thing itself, it is in the questions we choose to ask about it. Danny set down the trophy and spread his hands toward the stars visible through the dome above. Out there are billions of worlds, each one full of things that seem dangerous, things we have been avoiding for centuries, things we have been afraid to examine too closely. His voice grew stronger. But what if we approached them differently? What if we stopped asking only how to avoid the danger and started asking what else might be possible? Professor Ilmery stepped forward, her crystals burning bright. "Next semester, this institution will offer a new course, Terran Pragmatic Methodology. It will teach exactly the approach Danny has described, learning to ask better questions about dangerous specimens." She smiled, an expression strange on her crystalline face, but somehow perfect. Enrollment filled within one day. The waiting list now contains more than 8,000 names from across the known galaxy. Danny felt something shift in his chest. Pride, certainly, but also responsibility and hope. After the ceremony, his friends gathered around him outside the hall. Stars burned overhead. Ships came and went from the station's docking ports. The galaxy continued its endless motion. "So what happens now?" Riley asked. Her forearms were crossed in her usual nervous gesture, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Now we teach," Danny said, "and we learn and we keep asking questions." Whisper's glow patterns shifted to warm gold. "I want to examine the specimens from the restricted archive, hundreds of plants classified as too dangerous to study." "And I will help," Graves added. "My list has grown to over 500 entries. Each one might hold secrets like the Nightweep." Bramvith's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "My hive brothers have asked me to return home and share these methods. They want to examine the toxic flora of our own world." Danny looked at each of them in turn. Aliens from different species, different worlds, different evolutionary paths, all united by a willingness to ask new questions. "Then let us get to work," he said. "The galaxy is full of poisons waiting to become cures. All we have to do is ask what else they could be." He turned toward the laboratory wing, ready to begin the next chapter. Behind him, his friends followed. Above them, stars burned with ancient light. Somewhere out there, on countless worlds, dangerous plants grew in silence, each one holding secrets, each one waiting for someone brave enough and curious enough to ask the right questions. Food or weapon? The answer, as Danny had learned, was almost always both. And that was just the beginning.